Thanks for joining us today at the Veterinary Ledger. I am here with my friend Kimberly and Mackey, who has just the most interesting story of anyone I know in vet med. And so, I'm hoping that she will share it with us today. She has Candid Consulting, which I think is the perfect name for her, as she, as you will find out, is very candid. I think we're an adult audience, Kim, so you're welcome to share your stories as you'd like. What I love about Kim, here, let's introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Kim Mackie. I am the owner of Candid Approach Consulting, and I go and speak to different practices and different fields, not just in veterinary world, about how to make their team better, give them ideas, that kind of stuff. I've worked in the veterinary field for 15 years as a practice manager. I am a CVPM. And I also worked in law enforcement for over 30 years as a parole supervisor. So that gives me a lot of background to bring into the vet world. And that's about it.
I love that. So that's what I want to talk about first, is this role, that these parallels between a parole officer and a practice manager. Because I know we feel like we wear a lot of hats, but that's like a new one. So what skills crossed over on that?
Well, it's funny because actually, as a parole supervisor, I managed a staff of between 7 to 10 parole agents. And we basically supervise people that come out of the prisons and are living on the street to make sure that they don't commit another crime, get them help as far as drug and alcohol and stuff like that, which in a lot of practices, you utilize those same skills with your veterinary staff and clients too. So really, especially I think a lot of times in our vet world, we don't really put an emphasis on the issues that come along with people. A lot of people say that they got into the vet world to get away from people, but really there's no getting away from people. They're in the vet world. And I think a lot of times that we underutilize a lot of other things that we could be doing because we're focused on the pets per se. So you utilize it. Really, it's actually really interesting of how many things that I have used from my law enforcement field in the veterinary world. And that's how it got me into speaking and talking about that and talking about the techniques we use with supervising people into how to help manage your staff and build your team and do all those kind of things.
I know right after COVID, we talked a lot about de-escalation. I feel like clients have maybe gotten a little bit better, but there's still like those moments of such passion and like such anger that we still have to deal with time again. What are your takeaways for that, for dealing with the parolee versus the angry man with the chihuahua that didn't get a nail trim?
Basically, it narrows down to the same thing. They want to be heard and they want to be understood in both sides there. Like with us in parole, a lot of times it's the criminals have a really bad upbringing or a family issue, or they're dealing with mental health issues. And that kind of stuff, they just want to be heard. They want their story, their time to tell their story, and for us to understand some of the backgrounds. Now, don't get me wrong. There are some people that are just bad and criminal, and that's never going to change. So that doesn't matter how much talking you do, because they try to manipulate you. They lie. So they try to get their story out there, but that sometimes they just tell a story to tell a story. And we all have had some of those people in the vet field come in. Like your regular clients could be parolees. They could have mental health issues. They have a story to be told. So a lot of times when you have that angry pet owner, it's just that they're not feeling seen or connected to or understood. And they feel frustrated because they think that doctor or the other person in the office maybe is talking down to them when they talk in medical terms, when they say certain things that they don't understand. And then they start to get stressed because they don't understand the terms. They don't understand what's happening. And all they want is that pet to be safe and well and healthy. And they don't understand that might take some time and there might be some errors in the way as far as they're not getting the right medication or something like that because they have to try a different couple meds out. And it's just really, people need to understand that and to have somebody that's going to be able to listen to them about it.
It's so hard in that moment though, right? Like everyone's got emotions are ripe and Yeah, it's a hard one, but it's good to like have these conversations, right? If we talk about it before it happens, maybe we can have a plan of action.
Yeah, a lot of times when I talk to people about de-escalation and toxic workplace and all that kind of stuff, a lot of times it might not be they're getting everything, but they're getting one or two pieces that they have used. Like the best is when somebody sends me an email and says, "Oh my God, I used this technique and it worked." Just because hearing different people and how they deal with different situations, they're going to pick up certain things that might help them along the way. And all of a sudden it's going to pop out like, oh, I can do this. And that's going to help them. So that's what's great about, making sure we still talk about it and people know where they can go for references and resources.
So you open the door on toxic teams, which if people aren't suffering through it now, they've suffered through it at some point. What? Yeah. Do we treat them like parolees? What do we do with our bad apples?
You could treat them like parolees. That would help with the issue. Sometimes they could make it worse. So my whole view on toxic employees is that you have to make sure that your team is not getting the worst of it. You as a practice manager or as an owner might only get bits and pieces of it, but that team that they're working with every day are getting the worst of it. So fire them. Like for 30 years now, well, let's see, maybe not that long, for 20 years in the vet world, that's what the whole thing, we always have an issue. Everyone's like, I don't want to lose somebody because I don't want to hire somebody. And there's no staff out there. There's no resources to hire people. Well, you can't think like that. You really have to just let that person go. If it's going to cause so much toxicity in that workplace, it's not worth having that around, no matter, how shorthanded you are. A lot of times, if you talk to your employees and your team, they're going to tell you, I'd rather work harder than have that person with us every day causing these issues, because it's more stress and more mental health issues that your staff is going through by continuously opening that door and letting that person back in every day.
Huge, right? We all are afraid of losing bodies, and seems harder than ever to replace them. But how we've all been there where like having a warm body is not worth it.
Yeah.
What are some low key? Because sometimes you don't know that you're in it, right? Sometimes you just think that there's like, oh, so and so's grumpy, but like, what might be some toxic traits that we don't readily think about that are like bringing our team down?
So we used to say a lot of times in the parole world, so when I notice somebody's overly cheeriness, like a lot of times guys to try to play us into believing that they've changed and they're going to not commit any other crimes. So a lot of times with a toxic employee, they do the same thing. They'll be good for the first day after you talk to them, and then they'll start just small things coming back in why they're toxic. So like if you have somebody that always has negative comments to make about everybody in the practice. So the first day you talk to them and the next day they're okay. And then you'll hear a small comment that is that negativity coming back, and we ignore it. Then it's just the next day it gets a little bit worse. Then the next day it gets a little bit worse. So when you have that employee that you do have that first talk with and you're saying, okay, maybe we can work with them. Maybe we can do this. As soon as you hear that little negative coming back the next day, then you have to address it again. And that's where I think a lot of us make that mistake, is because it takes so much energy to deal with that toxic employee.
Right.
And then you just get over it and you think you're okay for a day, and then it comes back. And then in our heads, we're thinking, okay, I'm just going to give it one more day and I'm going to ignore it. And that's where then that person feels like, okay, I got one over on them. I'm just going to see how many more I can get over them. So it was a game with parolees too. They did the same thing. They're like, how much can I get away with before they actually do something to me again? And the toxic employees doing the same thing. They want to push the boundaries to see what else they can do to get away with. So really, it's whatever trait that you had that talk about what they're doing, then that's the ones that you have to be aware of and keep looking for. And negativity is pretty much the top one with a lot of toxic. I don't see any positives in anything a lot of the times. And that is where it comes out.
It's exhausting, right? Like,
yeah, it's very exhausting.
Do you think people can change, right? So you've seen kind of all of the spectrum of all of the people. Or in your opinion, if there is a bad apple, can you fix them?
I have, and it's it isn't. I went into law enforcement to help people, and over the years I have helped people, but unfortunately that's on the lower end of the scale pretty much. So it's hard. People are willing to change, but I don't know if we give them the resources in the veterinary world to make that change. Some people are just not going to be happy people and not and always going to find the negatives. But sometimes you can still work with them because you can kind of put some boundaries on them. Like, this is not where you're supposed to be negative. If you want to be negative, you can do that outside of work. And some people can hold it together because they know what their main goal is, to get paid every day and to have a job. So some people can keep that in that time period, but there's other people that you can't. But I mean, I give everybody a second chance. Everybody gets a second chance. And some of them can do what they want with it, and some of them won't do anything, and it will just keep repeating itself. So it's hard. It is.
It is hard, right? And everybody at the core, you feel like everybody has this like kind soul and wants to help animals. Yeah. And that's not always enough, right?
No, that is not. Some people are just not meant for this field either. A lot of people, they're so caught up in working with animals and saving them, and you're just not meant for this field, and you have to realize that. And sometimes they need people to tell them that, like, this is just not the job for you. And making space. A lot of people like to, when they have a toxic employee, is then switch them to do another position in hopes that position will make them happy, and then they can do that position. And sometimes that will work, but in the long run, it probably won't. That person is just, they feed off of that toxicity and something that their behaviors are, and that's how they are, and it's going to stay that way. Like in the criminal world, there's people that are just criminals. They're never going to change. They're not going to be non-criminal, no matter what it is, or who they, somebody that's in their family that might help them change or whatever. But some of them just never change because that's who they are, and we just have to accept it.
Yeah, it's in your core. I think you and I are a lot alike, and I question your candid conversations. Do people, if it's not like the person who's brought you in to have a candid conversation, do people usually appreciate the forthcomingness, the straightforwardness?
So at least the feeling I've gotten is yes, because a lot of times when I'm coming in and I'm talking to people that are bringing me in, a lot of the times they don't see it, because if it's an owner or a manager, a lot of times their employees are not telling them. So they're not going to be as candid as I am. So, and then they'll sit back and say, oh, I didn't realize I was doing that, because no one has told them, because they don't want to step up and tell them that they're doing that. And I think the biggest thing is in the vet world is people are afraid to hurt other people's feelings. Like, we're very family oriented, and a lot of practices are small, and there's, just that you're working with them really closely in small atmospheres, or even if it's a big practice, you're doing the same thing. And in the big practice, you're losing that connectivity to a person. So you just there's so many of you that you don't have that. But in a smaller practice, they just work as a team. So they don't want to offend anybody, and being candid is not offensive. You're just telling it like it is. It's not that you think down on that person because you're saying this, or it's criticism, yes, but it can be constructive criticism, because some people don't see how they are. Like, I'm loud. I'm really loud. And people think that as soon as I raise my voice that I'm yelling at them. Well, no, it's just that I'm passionate about what I'm talking about, so I'm loud. So, and I could disagree with you with everything, but in the end, I'm still your coworker or your friend, and I'm going to do what's best for the whole team. And if that means that my idea or my decision isn't the best one and somebody else's is, and that's better for the company, then I'm going to go with what's better for the company. And I think a lot of people just don't think like that. They just take it very offensively. But if you're upfront and you tell them that this isn't, this is what it is, I'm not going to sugarcoat it just to, I'm not going to be rude and screaming at you and yell at you and curse at you, but this is how it is. So some people really enjoy it and feel like they can get some understanding about what their staff is thinking. And other people are like, oh, I don't do that. So you're always going to have people that say they don't do it, but you got to back it up with examples. Like, yeah, this is what you just said. Somebody could take it this way. Perspective is everything.
Yeah, I think coming armed with examples is always so helpful, right?
Yeah,
Then it's
definitely.
less vague. Tell me, so now being out of both industries that you've kind of bounced between, which do you miss more?
Into the vet world, best
Yeah.
definitely. When you work in law enforcement, you get very jaded and you don't see, 30 years is a long time to be in there and I see the worst of the worst. So you see what the system does to people. And so it's nice to be out of that and just working with people that, there's still worse people in vet world, but it is a little bit more, you see the pets, you see the happy ending stories, you kind of see that kind of stuff. A lot of times in the parole world, you didn't see too many happy ending stories. So
Sad but true, right?
yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
goodness. So as you're doing your consulting, who needs you? What's your ideal dynamic for coming in and helping somebody? What are you looking for in a atmosphere, team?
Really, when I go into a practice to talk to about, or even when I'm doing my speaking events at conferences and stuff like that, when I'm talking to people, a lot of times you just need somebody to come in that is not in your practice, to hang out for a couple of hours, to see how everybody integrates, everybody, talks to each other, the connection that's there, the communication that's there. So really any practice can benefit from it, because it's not necessarily that a lot of times they wait till they have a big problem and then they ask me about it, how to fix it and stuff like that. But you want to make those changes before the big problem comes. So even if it's something like I visited a practice for talking to them about their DEA logs and their safety issues. And it started out as just DEA logs. But then when I went to the practice, I saw so many safety issues as far as I can see from a law enforcement side that people don't look at in the vet world. Like there's a door that in the back of the practice that is open and nobody can see anybody coming in, or the way they have their reception area lined up. There's no way in, there's no way out, or there's a straight line right back to your surgery room, or a straight line right to your drugs, or your drugs are all out front and as soon as they can come in. So a lot of times it's just somebody else taking your practice with a different eye and looking at it in a different view, and telling you little tidbits of how you can improve, how you can change something that's minor to make it better, those kind of things. So really, any practice can really benefit from my consulting. And like, obviously the connection between people, just getting them talking. And I can talk to anyone really. So just getting them talking and getting them to think outside of their normal conversation box is great.
I love that. Anything else? Any tidbits, any nuggets of wisdom you think the vet med world just needs to hear from you?
As far as people go, it's the connection. And a lot of times we don't have that connection, not only with our employees, sometimes we have that connection that's there, but it's more with the clients. You have to have a connection to them. And if you're just seeing the pet and talking to the client for 2 seconds and then leaving, a lot of that connection is not going to. Nowadays, people want to have that connection with their vet world, and that's what makes them come back, is that they have that connection.
Right.
And a lot of practices, we're so busy that we don't get that connection with them. And, not only do you need a connection with the pet, but you need a connection with the client. A lot of times that's lacking. So I guess my tidbit would be, make sure you're having that connected communication with the client whenever you can.
And the staff, right? To communicate. Hugs for everybody. Where can people find you if they want to look you up?
I am on Facebook at Candid Approach Consulting and on LinkedIn under that also.
Well, I appreciate your time and your candidness.
You're welcome.
I just love the crossover. I want everyone to hear your story because I think I just love the way they mesh together.
I definitely do have a different niche than most people with the law enforcement. So I think people appreciate the difference.
I love it. Well, thank you. Appreciate you.
Thank you.